So we are delighted to welcome an expert panel. We are in Kazakhstan, sort of sandwiched between a great military power to our north and a giant of an economy to our east. And as the World Bank has recently released country figures on GDP in purchasing power parity, the Chinese economy is now #1 with $34 trillion in 2023. The United States in the second position with $27 trillion. India in the third position with 14. And who's the fourth? Does anybody recall? Anybody from my class? Which is the Russia? The Russian economy is #4 now, right? In purchasing power parity, which is really the only way of making comparisons across countries. I mean, a massage is a massage, whether it's in Seattle or in Shanghai. And there is no reason to value a massage at $130 an hour in Seattle and only $30 an hour in Shanghai. So if an egg is an egg, a dozen eggs is a dozen eggs, then PPP is the only way to make cross-country comparisons, and any other way is really not what would be accepted as legitimate by economists. So we have a panel today. We have Dr. Norbert Funke from the IMF, and we have Roman from okay, wonderful. Could you help me, please? Oh, it's right here. Okay, all right. Okay, thank you. Senior economist with the Asian Development Bank, Azimzhan from the Eurasian Research Institute, Hans, who has been visiting us frequently, and we hope to have closer relations with him going forward, with CAREC. Anar, are you with our DPRK center? Okay, so Anar and I are locals. And Abylaikhan, who's the head of the renewable energies, and AUES. Okay, all right, wonderful. So why don't we begin? And I give the floor to, please.
Okay, so good afternoon, and thank you very much, Professor Naqvi, for the kind introduction. Thank you to KIMEP for the invitation. And when thinking about regional integration, I would like to take a step back first. Look at recent regional economic developments in the Caucasus and Central Asia. How has the environment changed over the last few years? And then why are we potentially wanting to integrate regionally? What could be the benefits of specific reforms? Just a few words about us. So we are a regional capacity development center called CCAMTAC, so Caucasus, Central Asia, and Mongolia Regional Capacity Development Center. And we are located here in Almaty and provide bilateral assistance and training to countries in the region. If we look at recent developments in the Caucasus and Central Asia, developments in terms of growth have been relatively robust, much more robust than many of us have foreseen at the beginning of COVID, at the beginning of the war from Russia in Ukraine. Many countries having growth rates above 5% until recently, and some of the better performing countries have been the small economies in the Caucasus, for example, Georgia and Armenia, who benefited a lot from immigration and financial inflows. So overall, relatively positive news on this one. Also, inflation has come down a lot, as we see on the right-hand panel, compared to the peak in 2022. However, notable is that inflation in Uzbekistan and Kazakhstan still remains higher than in most other countries in the region. What has changed since the onset of the war? And let us look at trade issues. So geopolitical tensions have increased trade interventions between political blocs. This development started really in 2018 with tensions between China and the United States, which started under the previous administration. And trade interventions have significantly increased and are still very, very high. The region has also sort of started to shift its trade patterns. If we look on the right-hand side, bilateral trade with non-aligned CCA countries has increased. What does it imply? So trade with China has gone up quite significantly during the last years compared to 20 years ago. And also trade within the region has gone up, but it is still at a very, very low level. And I think this is one angle we can discuss later about promoting further regional integration in trade. Also, sort of as the region has become more attractive and more on the landscape of international investors, and as global powers wanted to balance sort of their developments, foreign direct investment inflows into the Caucasus and Central Asia have increased quite significantly, as we see on the left-hand chart, and also remittance and other financial flows into the countries have gone up. So again, sort of this increase in FDI may be another interesting aspect to discuss when talking about further integration in the region. What are the outlook and the risks? So from the IMF's perspective, we just published our regional economic outlook in October after the annual meetings. We are projecting that in the near term, growth will still be relatively robust. And let us distinguish between oil importing and oil exporting countries. So growth is expected to be higher and remain higher in oil importing countries between 5 and 6%. If we compare this to oil and gas exporters in the region, which for us are Azerbaijan, Turkmenistan, and Kazakhstan, we are seeing that there the growth prospects are a bit more muted. That non-oil growth is relatively stagnant, and also we are not foreseeing an increase in oil-related growth, partly because of subdued oil prices, but also some capacity constraints. Inflation is expected to continue to go down, however, to remain above the level in other emerging economies. While the short-term outlook is positive, the downside risks, in our view, are very, very substantial. And the downside risks relate mostly to global developments and their impact on the region. There is continued increasing geoeconomic fragmentation, and uncertainty in advanced economies is very, very large. I think now with the US election, it may even still be larger, but also in some European countries, we see political shifts. And for example, the uncertainty in Germany, where I'm coming from, with needing to form a new government. And then also we are expecting that commodity price volatility will remain relatively high. So these are all very important global risks, which then translate also to risks to the region. Again, a point of thinking, how can the region, by cooperating, maybe cushion the impact of some of these risks? In addition, we have some regional specific risks, which could be an escalation of current conflicts. also conflicts just neighboring the region in the Middle East or within the region, and the risk of a slow pace of reform. I think in many countries, including like Kazakhstan, we have seen very strong announcement of reform objectives and ideas, but implementation seems to be slower than many of us had hoped. There are some upside risks, which I would not like to forget. It would be an easing of trade tensions and also sort of continued growth in advanced economies and stronger growth in advanced economies. So the risks are large, but now let me turn to policy priorities and see how the agenda of regional integration fits into these policy priorities. The longer term concern, despite these positive growth prospects in the short term, is that the region has stopped to catch up with advanced economies. So what we are seeing here on the left-hand chart, and Professor Naqvi mentioned before the importance of looking at purchasing power parity calculations. So we compare here Kazakhstan, Caucasus and Central Asia, and emerging markets in terms of purchasing power parity per capita with advanced economies. And we are seeing that in the early mid-90s, late 90s, the region and Kazakhstan have caught up quite substantially, narrowed the gap with advanced economies, but the narrowing of the gap really stopped in 2013, so just prior to this very difficult period for the region with commodity price declines. So there is clearly a need to review the growth model, and also let's think about the scope for regional integration and regional action together. If we look closer at what were the drivers of growth in the past, we see a very big change. We see that during the high growth periods in the early 2000s, productivity growth was very high, was driving growth, coupled with labor growth. However, more recently, we are observing that essentially productivity growth, which means learning by doing more with the same kind of resources, essentially is zero. Also, compared to other countries in the region, there has been very little investment. Capital deepening is very, very low. So again, I think from our perspective, from a regional perspective, these are two factors. We can think how to leverage it. More capital deepening could come with more infrastructure investment in the region, more joint infrastructure investment in the region, and then a number of structural reforms which can help to increase sort of productivity as well. So let's look at the policy framework and the type of reforms we think will be useful for the region, and also to foster closer regional economic integration. So first of all, I think each country also to prepare and to promote stronger regional integration will need to continue to modernize its monetary policy and fiscal policy framework. So we need to work on the existing institutions in each country, and can maybe also get a common understanding about what appropriate institutions are. On the monetary policy side, it's important to remain focused on price stability at the regional level, to avoid sort of being put under pressure from the political side that the central bank may lose independence, and also ensure that monetary policy and fiscal policy are coherent. Because what we are observing is that in some countries, monetary policy is tight while fiscal policy is loose, making the job of both more difficult. And then there are these financial sector reforms, which again can help to promote regional integration. On the fiscal policy side, as we are thinking about more infrastructure investment, more joint infrastructure investment, and more direct investment in the countries, it's very important to accompany this, to support this through better medium-term planning, better medium-term public financial management. and also ensuring that sort of countries have sufficient fiscal buffers if a next shock occurs, because we know at some stage there will be another shock and we will need to have sufficient fiscal resources to counter. So what are the structural policies which we see as very critical, and in many of these areas there is scope to cooperate in the region? In general, countries in the region should continue to reduce the role of the state and give more possibilities for the private sector to develop. And one important element in this area too is to strengthen government, strengthen the rule of law, strengthen the legal system, that private sectors feel more comfortable to invest and there are less risks associated with private sector investment. Then there is also another area, and I'm sure my colleagues will talk more about it, is to promote digitalization and connectivity. So for example, here in Kazakhstan, there's a lot of discussion about the digital tenge, and the discussion has moved from discussing retail digital tenge to more wholesale digital tenge, which potentially could also help sort of connect countries better and reduce transaction costs in international transfers. And then there is from our area, very important area, which is climate adaptation and mitigation. And let me look at this. Central Asian countries are particularly exposed to rising temperature and hefty rainfalls, also as we have seen here in Kazakhstan a few months ago, with the number of events being very high, affecting a large number of people and millions of dollars in material damage. So what role can the region play? So I think on the one hand, there are policies which are needed from a country-specific perspective. IMF sees a lot of potential for scaling back energy subsidies, to invest in renewable energies, and also to make coal and other carbon sources less attractive by incorporating some carbon pricing. We think that the region must really collaborate in green technologies, improve energy efficiency, and very, very good projects, for example, Ragun and Kambarata, so in Tajikistan and in Kyrgyzstan, who have the potential of increasing green production of energy and also fostering further collaboration in the region. Just a few words. What is the IMF doing to help countries? So we have, first of all, annually discussions on economic policies, which also feature sort of individual reforms as well as regional reforms. We had programs during the last 4 years with 5 countries in the region, and our own center and IMF headquarters is heavily engaged in bilateral technical assistance on our core areas, which are macro, fiscal, and financial sector issues. And we also have prepared quite a few analytical papers to the region, which may be of interest to some of you, in particular related to climate developments, including what can be done at the regional level together, but also on financial sector developments, again, with some scope to see what we can do together at the region. I think it's an important time to move ahead with the reforms. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah, good. So the chair's back. Thank you, Norbert, for economic analysis of the Central Asia economic performance. And I'm quite impressed by the IMF prescription. I think it's still very influential IMF role here. Now I would like to move to the other speakers. So the first one would be Roman Mogilevskii. He's the senior economist from Asian Development Bank. Now you have the floor.
Thank you very much. I would like to talk about something which is actually overlapped with what Norbert was just talking about. I talked about changes in trade in the economies of the region, Caucasus and Central Asia in a couple plus years, and then what does it mean for reorientation of trade and also trade routes in all this agenda of the famous middle corridor. And so there were several major external shocks affecting the region, and this reiterated interest to the middle corridor. Mentioned COVID and Russia's war in Ukraine and conflict in the Red Sea and other regional conflicts. But I would like to make a point that not only the transit between China and Europe was affected, but also trade of countries in the region themselves. Countries of Central Asia and the Caucasus, they use this corridor very much to trade both with China and with Europe and other partners of the West. ADB started using this corridor, talking about and developing this corridor long before it became fashionable. So more than 20 years ago, when the CAREC program, CAREC stands for Central Asian Regional Economic Cooperation Program, which now combines 11 countries. Well, Afghanistan is part of, kind of on hold, but other countries, two countries of South Caucasus, Georgia, Azerbaijan, 5 countries of Central Asia, Pakistan, China, Mongolia. So those countries are part of CAREC, and part of the CAREC activities is development of CAREC transport and economic corridors. And CAREC Corridor 2 is exactly the corridor which coincides with middle corridor. I'm not sure how to use hyperlink.
You need to something to press.
Please press me.
Carry
Yeah,
corridor 2.
Thank you. Just to show you what do we mean by CAREC Corridor 2, this red and one blue line. Basically, it starts from China, then goes either through Kazakhstan or through the southern route, Kyrgyz Republic, Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, both coming to the Caspian Sea, and from Caspian, either from Aktau-Kurik in Kazakhstan or from Turkmenistan, Turkmenistan to Azerbaijan, then Georgia, and then either through sea, through Black Sea or Turkey, basically. That's the route, whatever its main purpose in whatever branch you take, northern branch through Kazakhstan or southern branch through Turkmenistan, they all connect the region with Europe, other partners on the west, and with China on the other side. So can you please click on the map in any place? Yes, thank you very much. So people now talk much about this Trans-Caspian corridor. I just would like to stress that we understand the Trans-Caspian corridor broadly. Both branches, northern and southern, are considered. And among other routes which connect China and Europe, these routes appear to be politically least vulnerable. That's very important. That's part of the story why it is so interesting now. Before coming to the detailed analysis of this corridor performance, let me just provide some short information about what happened to the trade of the region in the last couple of years. And I don't want to spend too much time on this slide, but you can observe that for most countries, there was impressive growth of both exports and imports, both goods and services. Shortly speaking, that's what we observed. And what was driving that growth was energy prices for oil exporters, mentioned by Norbert, but also re-exports. It's known to everybody that the countries of the region are very much involved in re-exports from Europe, from China, from elsewhere to Russia. And I don't talk about sanctions here. Well, maybe it's partial sanctions evasion. That's possible. But most of these re-exports is civil goods, consumer goods, passenger cars, many other types of consumer electronics, many other things. So it's kind of not about sanctions. It's about huge gaps in the Russian market, which emerged after departure of Western companies from that market, and Central Asian countries, partially fueled in by their own goods to a little extent, and mostly through the re-exports from other markets. That's by now known as story for everybody. Also, migration was very important, and first it was recovery after the pandemic, but secondly, it was, of course, labor migration from Central Asian Caucasus to Russia and some other countries increasingly, but also from Russia, is very well known. There are a lot of unusual, politically motivated migration from Russia to all these countries. Georgia, Armenia in particular, but Kazakhstan also accepted many of them, and some Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan also were very active in this business. Okay. What happened to performance of this corridor? Because initially there were very big expectations of the corridor connecting the region east and west. We need to along this middle corridor, we need to consider its two alternatives. One alternative is ocean route between China and Europe, Shanghai to Rotterdam, think about, for example, or so-called northern corridor, which well-established rail-only corridor coming from China through Kazakhstan, Russian Federation, Belarus, to Poland and further in Europe. So those two corridors, both are unimodal, either ships only or rail only. And our exam middle corridor is multimodal. So it requires combination of rail, of sea through Caspian and then Black Sea, but also road transport, as we will see later, also plays an important role. So what happened to those competitors? We see that due to these issues during pandemics, the prices for ocean shipments and bottlenecks in the ports, prices for ocean shipments were very high at the end of 2021. The index used to measure that was $15,000 per 40-foot container, which is like incredible amount of money. Then with normalization of shipments, this fell to 1,000 in October 2023, so 15 times. But then it increased again, fueled by the Red Sea crisis, because the ships should go around Africa, and that made this expensive. And now this ends with July, but now in November it fell again substantially. So it's fluctuates up and down. Northern corridor, which was expectations that will stop performing at all because it goes through Russia. We know by now, we know actual numbers. It didn't stop. It reduced its operations, but it never stopped again, especially in the west-east direction from Europe to China. The volumes fell dramatically, but for Chinese shipments, basically even more, slightly more and more. Well, if you have look at the first graph on this slide on the top, you know that there is logarithmic scale on this graph. There was some decline in 2022, in 2023, but after the peak in 2021 related to the pandemic. But still substantial numbers. It's still hundreds of thousands of containers shipped every year through Northern Corridor. So it keeps performing. The traffic through Middle Corridor also achieved its peak in 2021 and then also start falling even faster. And also, please just compare numbers. Middle Corridor serves just several percent of the traffic on the North Corridor and less than 1% of traffic through the ocean. So it's so far very small, tiny route. Anyway, all of these channels keep working, so nothing very dramatic happens to the shipments of goods between corridors. Also, there were a lot of concerns in 2022 about shipping oil from Kazakhstan to Europe through this Caspian Pipeline Consortium. Well, at the end of the day, it normalized. That is still, in the aggregate numbers, you don't see much impact really. So if you look at the last slide on Turkmenbashi, also nothing dramatic happened with shipments through Turkmenbashi port. Importantly, that viability of this northern and middle corridor routes very much depends on the policy of Chinese government. The government of China, through its provincial governments, heavily subsidize the shipments through these rail routes. And there was a plan to gradually phase out the subsidies around 2020, but because of COVID, it was decided to keep them, and for the time being, they're still there. But the government of China never declared its intention really proceed with phasing out. No canceling this policy, but no kind of, if they eventually phase out, then economic viability of all these rail routes should be reconsidered because they will become much more expensive than they know. These subsidies, it's not like 10% subsidy, it's maybe 50% subsidy or sometimes even more, which means basically that the cost of shipping by rail is almost the same as shipping by sea. But by sea it takes many months, and by rail it is 20, 30 days. Yeah, sorry, I need to speed up. So recently there were several studies prepared on this topic, so I just would like to very briefly summarize them and also speak about one study at the end. So it was World Bank and others. So one important finding was that this corridor is going to serve mostly trade flows originated from or intended for countries of the region. It's not mainly not for the transit traffic between China and Europe. It is also useful for that purpose, but the main use for the region. It is very important critical resilience mechanism for the region, not so much for China and Europe, but for the region, there is no other alternative option. So it's really important. So far, transportation costs and times for shipments are very high. So if not strategic consideration, it wouldn't be really competitive. To fix the cost, you need large infrastructure investments. Even also, you need improvements in trade facilitation and logistics. And because so many countries are crossed by this route, you need really regional cooperation. I don't stop on all of these items, which are very important because it's other people's results. Basically, you can find them in the papers. What we can add to that? Because we stated, and also Norbert mentions that the intra-regional trade is so important, let's look how countries of the region use this corridor. First of all, they trade with China, and the trade is big and growing. China is now a major part, if not the main partner for all of them. Secondly, intra-regional trade is small, but if you split it into two components, one energy component, they trade a little bit in oil products, in electricity and something, that has no trend. But if you look at the non-energy trades, that is growing. And that is promising because in this trade, as you can see from the chart in the middle, countries of the region have better roles in this trade within the region compared to the trade with the rest of the world. With the rest of the world, the trade is very simple. We sell raw materials and we buy manufactured final products. In trade with our neighbors, we sell much more manufactured products and buy much more intermediate goods. So it's kind of more healthy type of participation in the value chains. But of course, it covers only a relatively small part of total trade of these countries. Also, this trade is highly asymmetrical for many reasons, because of different transport modes are used for exports and for imports. For example, for export, you use sea and rail, and for imports, you use much more road, and for different countries, also infrastructure developed differently. So again, we can discuss that more if needed. And final point is that road transport is very important for all these countries, even for Kazakhstan, which is huge. Steel roads are important, and for other countries, it is the main transport. I mentioned that EDB is developing this Trans-Caspian corridor, and it provides institutional framework for its development. As I mentioned, EDB keeps developing it for a long period of time already, and we now have pretty big pipeline of projects supporting this corridor. But also through hard infrastructure, through structural reforms like railway sector, for example, in many countries we support because railway is so important. By supporting soft infrastructure, you can see examples here. I can detail if needed. Importantly, and for researchers in this room, it may be interesting that EDB also provides monitoring and evaluation tool for corridor performance, so-called CPMM, corridor performance measurement and monitoring, which is unique and very rich data set, which still should be used to a maximum by the potential researchers in the region, and also institutional development. So just to summarize, Middle Corridor is strategically important for the region. It also has a role, but kind of secondary role, for this long-term, long-haul transit between PRC and Europe. It is a multimodal route, and from the point of view of climate change, which is very important, it is a disadvantage because rail is the best. So if you use road, then it's a disadvantage, but this means that we need to look for climate smart solutions, and then it still can be kind of supported. We cannot give up this corridor just for that reason. We do hope that it will be competitive and function in the long term. Major trade cost reductions should be accomplished. And this requires a mix of soft infrastructure improvements, competition enhancing structural reforms, because monopolism is an important factor here, institutional developments, and last, hard infrastructure investment. Only if those items, you have progress on them, then hard infrastructure investment will pay off indeed. I just would like to attract your attention to a very fresh book recently published by ADB and the ADBI, which has several chapters related to this CAREC corridor, and you can find this paper, which I just presented, but many more in this book. I invite you to download and read. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Roman. I think that you give us very good ADB prescription, which is very much focused on CAREC. And the CAREC Institute had their annual meeting here, exactly the same room. And the key for CAREC prescription is middle corridor. So middle corridor, I think, is really a good expression of inter-regionalism. So connectivity, trade, I mean, would be the key for the future of the world order. So I don't really care about Donald Trump, change everything. As long as we have middle corridor, as long as we have regionalism, as long as we have inter-regionalism, we would have a good world order, at least in Eurasia, right? Thank you very much for Roman's wonderful presentation. Next speaker would be Dr. Azimzhan Khitakhunov. He's a senior research fellow at the Eurasian Research Institute. And I also proudly noticed he worked before at KIMEP University. So welcome back.
First of all, I want to thank organizers for inviting me and giving this opportunity to talk about regional integration in Central Asia and the role of trade in regional integration. So I want to start with early initiatives, in particular Kazakhstan initiatives on regional integration. They included Central Asian Economic Cooperation, Organization of Central Asian Cooperation, Central Asian Union, but unfortunately, these initiatives were not supported by other Central Asian countries because of the different perception of regional integration processes in Central Asia and different vision of Central Asian integration. And as a result, Central Asia never achieved a free trade agreement or other deeper trade agreements. So in 2010, Kazakhstan succeeded in establishing customs union with Belarus and Russia, which in 2012 transformed into the common economic space. And in 2015, with the membership of Armenia and Kyrgyzstan, 5 countries established Eurasian Economic Union. So despite not having free trade agreements, Kazakhstan's trade with Central Asian countries are increasing. You see the share of Central Asia in Kazakhstan's total exports and Kazakhstan's total imports here. And if in 2005, Central Asian share in Kazakhstan's total exports amounted to 2.3%, in 2023, it increased to 7%. And the dynamics of trade, you see also positive. At the same time, the growth of the share of imports is not as much, but we see a positive tendency also for the reported period. The share of Central Asia in Kazakhstan's total imports increased from 2.5 to 3.6%. So we can compare these trade of Kazakhstan with Central Asian countries with Kazakhstan's trade with European Union countries. We can also see here the insignificant growth of European Union countries from 34% to 39%. At the same time, the share of European Union countries in Kazakhstan's total imports declined from 26% to 12% in 2023. These are trade by products. We can compare, this is Kazakhstan's trade with European Union countries. And you see that trade with European Union countries became less diversified, as in 2004, the share of mineral fuels amounted to 78%. And this figure changed to, in particular, increased to 94% in 2023. So the shares of other products, including inorganic chemicals, iron and steel, cereals, are close to 1%, and the shares of other products are negligible. At the same time, we see that Kazakhstan started to import less machinery and electrical machinery from European Union. We know that Kazakhstan buys a lot from China, and China gradually substituting European Union on Kazakhstan's market. But despite the previous less diversified trade with the European Union countries, trade with Central Asian countries are different. You see that in 2023, the Kazakhstan's export to Central Asian countries consisted of 45% of agricultural products, then iron and steel, and machinery was 9%. But you see the significant growth of the share of machinery from 3% in 2005 to 9% in 2023, and the substantial reduction of the shares of mineral fuels from 33% to 8%. So the structure of imports is similar and diversified, as Kazakhstan imports diversified range of products from Central Asian countries, consisting of agricultural products, ores, slag and ash, mineral fuels, nuclear reactors, and different vehicles. At the same time, we also see here the significant reduction of mineral fuels with the substantial growth of machinery. So cooperation potential is huge. And first of all, I want to focus on trade cooperation in Central Asia, as I believe the following measures can strengthen regional integration in Central Asia. First of all, as we trade mainly in agricultural area, agricultural products, it is very important to implement joint projects in agricultural sector. At the same time, it is very important to reduce trade costs in the region and eliminate non-tariff barriers. And firstly, to focus on sanitary and phytosanitary measures. Recall the recent trade conflict between Russia and Kazakhstan, where sanitary and phytosanitary measures played a key role in banning exports from Kazakhstan for Russia. And the recent solution was announcement of by the two governments a decision to align information systems on sanitary and phytosanitary measures. So this process has started. At the same time, it is very important to use capacities of special economic zones and propose industrial trade and logistics hubs on the border areas between Kazakhstan and Kyrgyzstan, between Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan. So, but not to manage them as in the same way, but to use these platforms as experiments, to use their capacities of the special economic zones and proposed trade hubs as experimental platforms, and maybe to implement those measures that we want to implement on the national scale. So if they succeed, let's enlarge them to the national policies or regional policies. We shouldn't forget about infrastructural cooperation. Middle corridor is one of key priorities of Kazakhstan, and we try to attract investments in this. The recent EU commitments to invest around 10 billion euro in this project shows its significance. And of course, the start of the China, Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan railways also can contribute substantially to the growth of regional trade. And these measures can increase production capacity, contribute to the diversification of Central Asian economies. I want to add that the goals of bilateral trade shouldn't be just setting some kind of amounts just to increase the bilateral trade with certain countries up to 4 billion or 10 billion. We need to adopt broader measures, specific measures that trade should contribute to the diversification of Central Asian economies. These measures can help to penetrate new markets and increase export capacity and improve competitiveness. Of course, we don't have some kind of supranational institutions in Central Asia to manage and govern these processes, but we have CAREC program, CAREC Institute, which can coordinate these measures and serve as a good platform to implement them in reality. So I believe that these measures can strengthen regional integration in Central Asia using trade if they will be politically and economically supported. Thank you.
Thank you, Azimzhan. The title of your speech is Trade as a Factor of Central Asian Regional Integration. So I agree with you, trade will surely, through positive spillover effects, would be connected with production, market, and also working together with the infrastructure connectivity. So philosophically, trade would be essential for the future Central Asian integration. So you are right, you point again to CAREC. I think that all the regional players, including China, European Union, would very much support for a Eurasia trade platform or infrastructure, because that is how a region's integration starts from. The good positive spillover effects will spread over to other functional areas. I'm optimistic about that. Once again, thank you. Now I would like to invite our very good friend, Hans, the former chief economist at the CAREC Institute, to give us a talk. So I think CAREC has been highlighted several times.
Yes.
So thanks a lot for having me here. Thanks a lot for the great presentations before me in the morning and also right now. And thanks a lot for listening and your interest. And yes, I'm from the CAREC Institute. And Roman, thanks for the already explained what CAREC is, so I don't need to repeat. There's a CAREC program, which to a large extent is driven by the Asian Development Bank, but not only, thankfully, also by other development partners. And there is the CAREC Institute based in Urumqi, China. So I'm until recently and still as a consultant with the CAREC Institute. In the next couple of slides, I will return to the topic which was here discussed already right now, like trade. I think everyone of my pre-speakers were touching on this topic. So, and I will show you some stylized facts about intra-regional trade within CAREC and with the other regions or countries. I will talk here about CAREC excluding, will look here as the People's Republic of China, the PRC, as an external player. So basically CAREC can be viewed as the extended Central Asia region. What you see here is the share in the trade volumes over the last 20 years, how it developed in the region. The red line is intra-CAREC trade. CAREC, as I mentioned now, excluding the PRC. Then you have the yellow line, which is Russia. Then you have the gray line with the EU. Basically, since the financial crisis, the share of the EU 27 is going down. And then you have the rest of the world. If you look at the red line, intra-CAREC trade, it slightly increased since 2008. However, it's still very low. And I don't know, maybe in 2023, there's still a bit of question of the data reliability. There's still revising of the data in the databases. But basically, we have a little bit of an increase, but still pretty low, and something like 7% with some volatility. The real dynamic factor here is China, the People's Republic of China, even so with some plateau between 2012 and 2019. But this is the really dynamic factor in this development. I want just make a remark on this Chinese development. So what you'll see here is the trade deficit from a Chinese perspective. So what is up is a surplus of other countries with China, even so it's minus here. I reverted the scale. And what you can see here is since 2013, even so it was a bit before also a higher deficit, but since 2013 we have a real increase in the trade deficit of the region with China, and there are some exceptional countries like the Kyrgyz Republic mentioned also by Roman, and especially since 2022. And this is, of course, in part re-exports, as also mentioned by Roman, but also from some other countries. This is just a side remark. Here I come to my main chart, which is a bit more complicated, but I will explain it to you. What you see on the x-axis, this is product groups by harmonized system, two-digit product groups, a usual methodology in accounting for trade internationally. And the bluish bars, this is the share of these product groups in intra-CAREC trade. So if you look at the mineral fuels on the very left side, for example, roughly 18, so the intra-CAREC trade, 18%, roughly 18% of the intra-CAREC trade are mineral fuels. Another relatively high trade within CAREC is cereals, largely coming from Kazakhstan, by the way. And the third one, you have also iron and steel. So this is for 2023. And this is the left-hand scale in percent. The orange line and the green line refers to the right-hand scale, and this is times the intra-CAREC trade. So if we go again to mineral fuels, so the CAREC region export roughly 40 times more to the rest of the world than is the intra-CAREC trade. And if you go to the very right side, so the CAREC region imports 55 times more from the rest of the world than from itself. Yeah. In the middle, you have all products. It's written here 14.2. And this is roughly, I said before, the intra-CAREC trade as a share of the overall trade is 7%. So this is times, so 7 times 14 is roughly 100%. So this is roughly the same figure as I showed you in the first slide. And if you look at the left-hand side, the CAREC region is very export dependent here. We saw before Kazakhstan exports oil mineral exports to the EU, right? So on the left-hand side, it shows that the region is highly export dependent. And on the right-hand side, it shows that it's in this product group is highly import dependent. If you compare this with the EU, like we are talking about the internal market, and the concept of internal market is very much kind of has an EU brand. So in CAREC, again, if you look at all products in CAREC, the trade with outside world is 14 times. In the EU, the same figure is 1.7, not 14. Yeah. If you look at imports, it's roughly the same, 14.2 versus 1.8. If you look at the maximum, again, so in the mineral fuels, it's 40 times more to the outside world than within the CAREC. And the same maximum figure in the EU is 8.9, but this is for books and arts. Yeah, the next one is still 5, I forgot, it's for ships, which is not very typical. So it's a completely, in some way, a completely different world. The maximum on the import side, it's 50.55 times. In the EU, it's 8.8 times, again, for books and arts and other product groups. Very much lower. By the way, the blue bars altogether represent roughly 80% of intra-CAREC trade. So this brings me to the question here. So what CAREC integration in this trade sense is good for? Is it about an internal market in the EU sense? And my answer would be probably no. Yeah, what we need the CAREC integration, economic integration for, is to have economies of scale and scope in the regions, but still with some perspective of exporting and combination with the rest of the world, much more than is the case for the EU. And if I go back, I mean, more probably if we concentrate more in this middle segment of this CAREC product groups, where it's a bit less export dependent and a bit less import dependent, this is probably the there we find more opportunity probably to increase the inter-CAREC trade. However, going back, even then, it might be difficult to come any near to an internal market in the EU sense. So what is really needed, I think, in terms of integration is especially cooperation in critical fields. And Roman talked about corridors. So this is definitely one of the focuses where we need to have cooperation, including trade facilitation and hard and soft infrastructure. Then we need a new wave of green electrification, in part also to move a bit away from the fossil fuels. Yeah. And here we have a lot of questions for grid and storage and electricity trade, also between the upstream and downstream countries, like there was Rogun mentioned in Tajikistan, or in Kyrgyzstan is building now even together with Uzbekistan and partially Kazakhstan. So there is new in order to have a more to also reduce fluctuations and have more storage and have more potential to move to renewable energies, which is quite volatile. So we need new wave of green electrification, especially grid storage, electricity trade cooperation. And then we have digitalization and our infrastructure. We talked less about this today, but we need for this also broadband, better broadband connectivity data centers and interoperability of all this. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Hans. Your presentation makes us realize that the CAREC, especially the Central Asia integration, is still very much lacking of internal market. So the Central Asia regional integration is still at its infant stage. And it's also thought-provoking what a role China plays, right? It seems that China is too big. So maybe China, Central Asia is more inter-regionalism. But if we want to focus on Central Asia regionalism should be driven by endogenous factors instead of just exogenous factors. So thank you for this very profound trade analysis. Next, we're going to invite Dr. Anar Shaikenova. She's our senior researcher at DPRK Center of KIMEP. And she's also assistant professor at our Department of Public Administration, CSS. Anna?
Thank you all very much. Good afternoon. It's very nice to be speaking today after so many presentations on trade connectivity, regionalism, and trade integration. I'll be talking about how Central Asian countries are navigating and the sanctions. So Roman Mogilevskii mentioned about the middle corridor and its modest role compared still to the northern route and compared to the sea route. But then we see that, you know, with the war, Russia invasion in Ukraine, that really the middle corridor received a new impetus, and it increased the volume of trade along the middle corridor. So I'll talk about that. And then I'll talk about which items should be sort of taken with caution during that trade. It's sanctioned items, also the dual use meaning they can be used for both purposes, for military and civilian use, and that's why they're controlled. And that's has been a very big concern for US, EU sanctions. And really the war has, you know, the sanctions moved very quickly, and the war started so abruptly that, you know, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, and Armenia found themselves in a very tricky situation. We are part of Eurasian Economic Union, and which implies free movement of goods and services and really, you know, customs borders. And so how do you control for sanctions and for dual use items? And very quickly, how do you enforce them within Kazakhstan and Kyrgyzstan? I'm not going to be talking about Armenia, but I have some data for 2 other countries. And then the fourth question I will, I guess, conclude with would be how Kazakhstan really coped, how we adjusted. There was some time lag with sanctions and international obligations. But then how did really Kazakhstan, within this institutional setting of no customs borders within Eurasian Economic Union, how really, what happened? So Roman Mogilevskii had a much better map than mine. This is what I found. And I really wanted to show the middle corridor and its increase, you know, the route through Kazakhstan. And this map I really like too, because it had a route on Turkmenistan, and also this proposed route, that, the railway that will be built on China, Kyrgyzstan, and Uzbekistan. And basically, this is some statistics I found. You already had better trade statistics on middle corridor, but really, with the Russian-Ukrainian crisis, a lot of trade has been moved from China to Europe on the middle corridor, which is an alternative, as we said. You know, a lot of it in 2022, 45% of that trade, you know, was on account of Kazakhstan. The volume of cargo transportation has increased. It's still modest. It's like 1.1 million tons in 2022, 2 million tons in 23. I read statistics that Aktau port can go up to 21 million tons. So compared to their capacity, it's still a minuscule amount. But what was interesting, in one of the articles, I found that Russia is also using the middle corridor, although they have the northern one, but they all, you know, 63% increase the containers from Russia going to China, which was an interesting finding to me. And so today I'll be talking about two HS codes, and they're both sanctioned, and some of it, depending on technical characteristics, it's also dual use. And so this shows two different exports. I don't think my laser works, does it? Oh, and that's tricky to point there, and then it shows up here. No, I can't do that. I'll just, yeah. No, it's okay. I think you can see here that until the war, until 2022, the exports of Kazakhstan from EU were very modest for our own consumption of engines and motors. And then after the war has started, we increased in 2022 by, this is in millions of dollars, by at least $10 million for the engines and motors. And then also in 2023, this trend continued. And then we have not really absorbed it internally in Kazakhstan. It was re-exported to Russia. So if in 2023, you can see that most of what we imported from EU, 37 million worth of dollars, was redirected from Kazakhstan to Russia. And that's for engines and motors. And then the next slide is HS code 8471, automatic data processing machines, which is basically computers. And it's the same trend, a little bit, no, it's not the same. It's a little bit different trend. In 2022, we exported a lot to Russia, and actually more than we bought from EU. Probably we, imported from China and then added it up, and these are Russian exports of Kazakhstan of computers to Russia. And then the trend goes down in 2023. Both EU and both Kazakhstan exports have decreased, and I'll try to explain through the presentation why. Okay, this is the same trend for automatic processing machines, computers in Kyrgyzstan. Kyrgyzstan also has not really an exporter of computers to Russia, but it started in 2022 and 2023. But the numbers are a little modest compared to Kazakhstan. Okay, I wanted to look at, and then on the other hand, EU exports for the same code, computers, to Russia, they decreased by 82% in 2022 already. So if before Russia bought $1.4 billion worth of computers, in 2022, it was only 263 million, probably decreased in the following years. This trend here, it's not a very good map. What all I wanted to graph here, all I wanted to show is that Kazakhstan is the bigger, how do I say, the country that is taking most rerouting, and Kyrgyzstan, a little bit of it, also Uzbekistan. But then I also checked Tajikistan and Turkmenistan, and they're not so much involved into rerouting of exports. It's probably because of our routes. Routes that Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan and Kyrgyzstan are much closer, much easier in terms of trade to do the re-exporting. And however, it's not all that gloomy as I showed it on my graphs. So there were reports, different studies done mostly by Bloomberg, cited by other, organization. Also EBRD did a study. So they said, well, those volumes are very small. Russia has much bigger need. And so whatever Kazakhstan, whatever Kyrgyzstan are actually, sort of supplementing is a very small in the amounts of what Russia has lost actually. And then Kazakhstan only accounted for 7% of rise of those items that are actually, prohibited, dual use and very, sanctioned items. And it mostly the increase is because of the over-compliance of EU countries, firms, which actually reroute through Kazakhstan because of the transportation links. So this is from report of Bloomberg, and they said, well, it's basically really the trade has increased with Kazakhstan in those sanctioned items, restricted items, they only compose 7%, so it's not that bad. The other, I've taken a slide from a friend of mine from the State Revenues Committee. So they talked about different innovations that they have actually introduced on the Eurasian Economic Union. Before, there was really no enforcement. The war started, there are no customs officers, you could not stop, you could not do a lot of things. And so they have introduced much better enforcement. First of all, several EU delegations came, the US delegations came and complained, well, what is the spike with all the re-exporting going on from Kazakhstan and Kyrgyzstan? And those delegations visited 2 countries. And, Kazakhstan's authorities, they actually stop, they verify, they introduce not the customs declaration, but there is a tax declaration that is online. And then it actually does all the profiling and screening and stopping. So they have been much more effective starting April 2023, when that tax declaration kicked in and all the goods that are crossing Eurasian Economic Union have to submit it. And actually it works as, it's not actually tax declaration, it's called goods invoice, товарно-сопроводительная накладная. And so it kicked in, and so it allowed for Kazakhstan to transport much better, to control sanctioned items much better. But still we do have we have companies that are sanctioned by UK, EU, and OFAC, which is with the US. This is like some companies from Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan that have been sanctioned. These are some items that were stopped at the Eurasian Economic Union border. It's like optical прицел, targeting, and then drones, some caskets. So this is like a sanctions explorer. For Kazakhstan, currently we have 10 companies that are sanctioned, only 1 by EU, 1 by, I think 6 by UK, Uzbekistan 20 and 2. So very modest numbers, Turkmenistan, Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan. But in conclusion, what I wanted to say, or maybe with this, that really, the Kazakh government has been saying this is more of a, individual companies, individual people violating, not really a systemic issue. And we're trying to introduce enforcing and comply with dual use regulations and our international obligations. Out of 5 countries, really, it's Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, and Uzbekistan that are doing some rerouting. Sanctions will stay for a long time, and then it's for them to work. The governments must be really enforcing them. That is the key for the sanctions to work. So it's basically strengthening, preventing circumvention. There was some time lag for Kazakhstan and Kyrgyzstan, but I don't know what Kyrgyzstan has done, but Kazakhstan has introduced bold measures. but we will still see some more firms and individuals sanctioned in Central Asia. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you, Anna, for touching upon my favorite subject, trade sanctions, trade circumvention. Yeah, remember the EU ambassador Alaska came here. She said that one of the biggest challenges for EU-Kazakhstan relationship is circumvention. It's a serious problem between Kazakhstan and the European Union. Now we're going to have the last panelist, Dr. Abylaikhan Soltanayev. He's the head of educational program in renewable energy and hydropower at the Almaty University of Power Engineering and Telecommunications.
Hello, dear guests and participants. It's an honor for me to speak today and discuss about sustainable development energy in Central Asia. Our regions face some challenges, but also it has significant potential for integration and economical growth. In my speech, I think I want to start from energy food water nexus and the economical implementation of the countries of our Central Asia region. So this way. Okay, hold on, please. So let's start why is sustainable development and energy transition are crucial for Central Asia region. And as I said, if we have like a unique challenges in, let's say, firstly, I think about the water scarcity and the strong release on the hydrocarbons and the need to adapt to the climate change. So for energy transitions, we can say it's not just an environmental initiative, it's also a vital step toward economical security, to reducing vulnerable for external factors and opening up to the new opportunities to economical growth. For example, if you take about renewable energy sources like solar and wind power, this is like offer if resilience, lower emissions, and the economical diversification in our regions. And this transition is was essentials for achieving long-term stability and the prosperity in the region. And for the important concept for Central Asia, I can say about the energy food water nexus. And in our regions, is a water scarcity significantly impact both for food production and energy generation. And the hydropower, for example, in our region, the key energy source, it's a depends on heavenly water availability, which create competitions. It's water availability for the agriculture, especially during dry seasons. So renewable energy sources can offer solutions that place so less strain to water resources by reducing a dependence of water-intensive energy sources. So we can help ensure sustainable resource management that support agriculture and energy security. The regions. So Central Asia main sources of greenhouses. It includes energy productions, agriculture, transport, and for example, if called Kazakhstan also is like metallurgy and other industry. So climate change poses special risk for these sectors. For example, because we have like rising temperatures from every year, it's shifting to weather patterns affect the crop yields and the water availability. For example, temperature in Central Asia, it grows from 0.1 and 5 to 0.5 degree of Celsius over past for 50 years, which warming more pronounced in valleys and lowlands. And nowadays, climate models suggest that temperature could be rise by 2.5 and up to 6.5 Celsius degrees by the end of century, and it will be leading to very significant impacts to shrinkage of mountain glaciers and which is our region's water sources. Because so that means climate change can be pose serious risk to public health, especially for the poor peoples who must vulnerable and effects for droughts and desertifications, and also it will impact to agricultures because this is will be suffer from the droughts, extreme temperatures, and also natural disasters such like mud flows and floods. For example, we have in Kazakhstan last year, and and also have because the mountain region is like a water resource of our regions. So, but because this is temperatures is high, so warming and shrinking glaciers is we can threaten the future power of water supplies. So climate change may increase tension between countries along the rivers between the countries because we have maybe some 10 years we have some problems between Uzbekistan and Kyrgyzstan, Kazakhstan also between Kyrgyzstan, especially for water resources. So as I say, because we have like upstream countries and downstream, for example, Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan, they rely on the hydropower plants. When we have like a Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, they also extract and they use this as like a gas, oil, coal for generate energy. Also, this is can be case somebody can say it's unfair and can become the problems in low water years. For example, Kyrgyzstan, for example, they start to collect the water in the water dam. That means the water level in the river is down, and in the for downstream countries like Uzbekistan and Kazakhstan, the water is down for agricultures, especially for spring times. It becomes the problems and it become political between these countries also. Also, as I said, because border conflict, I think maybe one of them, for example, I think Dr. Hans Kozak knows about the Fergana Valley, especially because this is Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan, and Tajikistan. But this is three countries. They don't divide the border in the Ferganas, and this some ethnic composition is also is not correspondent to national boundaries. This every time at the moment there can be problems about the land, especially and also for water resources. So as I said, our entire region have some problems. So that means we need to have like a become like for the strategies making for adaptations and to like manage our water resource and for agricultural energy and mitigation, which focus on reduced emissions for fossil fuels. So this is dual approach is essential to protect our most vulnerable economic sectors and to ensure that a sustainable path forward. And in for COP21 in Paris, so the parties reached future agreements. So to combat with climate change and accelerate the intensive actions and investment to need to sustainable low carbon future. So for this is efforts through by national determined contribution or NDC. So to have the increase in global average temperature to well below to 2 degrees to pre-industrial levels, and for the temperature increase to 1.5 degrees up to pre-industrial levels. So to reduce the risk and the impacts of climate change. And for this is the NDC for Kazakhstan, for example, they said like so they reduce greenhouse up to 15%. And for Kyrgyzstan also it will be also decrease for 1 to 2 tons by CO2 per GDPs. And for Tajikistan also and the Turkmenistan also say so they will stop and lower the emissions. And for Uzbekistan reduce the energy intensive GDP by the half. So and also so this goal reflects the regional commitment to tackling this climate change and allows with the international frameworks. So achieving these goals will create a require technology investments and the cooperation across borders between all Central Asia countries and its international partners. So priority sector for climate change adaptation Central Asia, I can say also, as I said, so you can see in the slides, so most I said for energy and the agriculture and for water resources, you can see it. So this is areas are crucial, not only the environmental impacts, but also for the livelihoods and economic of our Central Asia regions. So for next slide, I think everyone sees no, but short I can say for Central Asia clean energy targets. As I say, for Kazakhstan, we have also 15% by 2030, 50% of renewable by 2050, and the carbon neutrality by 2060. Uzbekistan also want to do like a 30% of renewable energy generation by 2030, very say to ambitious plans. Kyrgyzstan Republic is 10% of renewables energy, but because Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan said they more rely about hydropower, as we can assume like a clean energy, can we assume so? And for Turkmenistan, they said at the moment that's a reduction of CO2 emissions. They not to put a real like these targets. So as I said, so at the moment, I think most the problem maybe for I think for Kazakhstan because we have a lot of energy consumption, especially for our industry, and the 66% is for generated came from the coals. That's why we need more invest for the energy transitions. And Kazakhstan is start for like a first country to become like go to renewables energy using in the Central Asia. But after at the moment, Uzbekistan is rapidly increases for this renewable energy, and I want to say that at the moment Uzbekistan become leader on the renewable energy than the Kazakhstan even. And even I say they have the targets to make a 40% for renewables and share by 2030. Even Kazakhstan only 15%. And also because also we they have for example like also internationals like organizations become help to increase renewable energy capacities like United Arab Emirates Masdar and Aqua Power from Saudi Arabia and in Uzbekistan also it's coming. Yes, sorry, 2 minutes. Yes, so I need to do. Okay, this is all how to increase in Kazakhstan about the auctions. And this is become in Kazakhstan also become this is came also Kazakhstan, Masdar, Aqua and Total Eren. And I want to say about one from Kazakhstan is a big project between Kazakhstan and Germany about the hydrogen. It's from serving company is Hydrogen One. They want to plan to construct around 40 gigawatts of renewable energy in Aktau region. It's a very big one to create 20 gigawatts of electrolyzers. That means they want to make from water using the process and produce the hydrogen. And I think at the moment by the mix of this ammonia to export to the European Union, to the Germany, also uses like a mid corridors. So by the Kurlik ports. And for the Uzbekistan, also they, as I said, they become at the moment the leader for the renewables energy. They also want to achieve 25 total gigawatts for by 2030s. But also because we have big achievements, but I want to say also can be problems. The problems may be about because this is all big projects, but for small projects we need more private investment because many investors and business they are criticized also Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan because especially Kazakhstan have auctions and several years it was mistaken because for example 2014 years per kilowatts and the auction every auction is decreased. And when starts a new auction, it starts not from the started prices, it started from the decreased. And in the end, it decreased up until to 12 of tenge per kilowatts. That means investors stop it and just don't want to also participate in auction. And this years, they again understand that we mistake it and started by new way. At the moment, the auction is started and Kazakhstan, at the moment they have it more. I think 200 megawatts already for small hydropower plants. They are announced and the auction it was wins. That means because it was 5 years ago, the hydropower stations, it was stopped in Kazakhstan, these projects. Now it was announced. And for the, also I want to say is also because we increased a lot of renewable energy capacities in countries, but the problems is about the new programs and universities don't have it. In Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan, only several universities, they training for students for renewables energy. Yes, so this one. And that means we need more renewable energy programs and for that clean energy and engineering and management like this one. Also, I want to say like we also work with OEC, for example. Also they promote this energy transition together, and also especially they help in gender equality. That's like a woman role as the empowering engineer, renewable energy and electricals programs. So sorry for this one, maybe one last one. Let's say example really. So because as I said, there should be capacity, human capacity. For example, in Uzbekistan, September it was complete destruction for 100 megawatts Sherbat solar plant by the storms. That means when they construct this solar power plants, they didn't assume about local wind conditions. And when they in Uzbekistan, I think one university in Tashkent, it was burned by fire because when they installed solar panel in the roof, again, this was not how say they didn't assume it like a fire safety norm. That means this was no specialist who installed it properly, and the university campus it was fired. In Kazakhstan, also several small hydropower plant. It was also burned some general units, and generators burned something. I want to say one project. It was invested €1 million. It just burned because one how to say this was no good specialist for this one. Okay, of course. Thank you very much for the time.
Now I'd like to invite our heavyweighted, not physical heavy, but in terms of importance, our colleague Nadeem. He's our economics professor from our Department of Economics. That we have before.
Thank you. This has been a delightfully, empirically intensive set of presentations, very enlightening. It brings a clear picture to the fore. And distilling from the data that was presented, as Hans pointed out, intra-Central Asian trade is minuscule compared to intra-EU trade. Is that correct, Hans? Yeah. So the great benefit that the European Union has derived from trade within this 27 member nations is not something that characterizes Central Asia. So the question then arises, what is the role of regional integration in this region? I mean, why are we asking for it? What are we getting out of it? Clearly, it's not intra-Central Asian trade. Another issue that empirically comes out very clearly is that there is a considerable amount of exports going to Europe through Central Asia from China. In addition to Kazakh and other Central Asian, Turkmen and other exports to Europe, there is also non-resource exports from China going to Europe via Central Asia. And their infrastructure does take on a very significant role, in particular greener forms, namely the construction of locomotives and the train routes that could be established. So connectivity with greener forms of transportation is significant both through the middle corridor as well as the northern corridor. And as long as the conflict continues in the Israel-Palestine region and the Red Sea continues to face challenges with regard to exports of commodity, the trade of commodities, the Red Sea region will not remain economically competitive. Moving on to the issue that Anar raised with regard to sanctions, we have had an election in my country, and Donald Trump has been elected the president, and he has vowed to shut down, to the best of his capability, the Russia-Ukraine conflict. And if that gets shut down, then what is the meaning of sanctions on Russia? Sanctions for what when there is no conflict? so that the issue of sanctioning firms or countries for selling commodities to Russia directly or via other countries becomes a meaningless issue. Is yes or no? I mean, if there is no war, who are you sanctioning for what? So, what is it that remains then? I mean, yes, Europeans have issues with Russia, but Americans are somewhat divided. And the vast majority of the popular vote has gone to Donald Trump. Not only Electoral College, but the popular vote, the House of Representatives and the Senate have all gone to the Republicans. So there will be a new set of rules that will come into force. We expect them to come into force. And then sanctioning of countries based on the conflict between Russia and Ukraine is not likely to last. Now, whether there'll be new sanctions that Donald Trump may impose on China, that remains to be seen. But as I pointed out at the very beginning of today's panel discussion, China is now the #1 country in the world in terms of economic prowess, $34 trillion in PPP, United States, 27 trillion. And you can impose all the tariffs you want on China. You cannot change the fact that China has a massive amount of human capital. To just give one example, every year the United States produces 500,000 post-secondary graduates, bachelor's, master's, and PhD, 500,000 per year. China produces 4 million per year. So for every single American post-secondary graduate, China produces 8 times as many. And you need line engineers in the manufacturing sector to be able to have supply chain density and supply chain advantages to be able to become a major manufacturing hub. And there is no country on the planet today that can supersede China in terms of the manufacturing capability, none. In addition, Germany has shot itself in the foot by raising energy costs so that BASF is now shutting down operations and opening up plants in China. Volkswagen is talking about shutting down plants after about 87 years. Olaf Scholz is now out. The German government has collapsed. And on the 23rd of February, we will have elections in Germany, correct? So with this geopolitical landscape, we are looking at a very different world. So my question, the question as a development economist I keep coming back to is, what is it that Central Asia can do? And what Central Asia can do, has been trying to do, is doing, and would want to do, is to have human development, expansion of the capabilities of the human beings who live in the Central Asian countries. And that requires a return to basics. Now, there is no shortage of land in this region. There is no shortage of unskilled labor in this region. There is plenty of Chinese capital waiting around. In fact, we are often consulted by the Astana International Financial Center as to what kind of projects we can recommend for Chinese capital to finance within Kazakhstan, and we can't come up with any simply because we do not have enough skilled workers, skilled labor in Kazakhstan or in Uzbekistan or in Kyrgyzstan. Human capital is deficient. So what can we do? Educate our people, skill them up. So that, because capital has to work with skilled labor. Capital cannot cannot produce output by itself. Capital must work with human capital, with skilled workers, with educated people. So the only plan I can see, the only obvious, evident forces that I can observe is the need to develop, to educate our people, to develop skilled people, so that we have a larger stock of human capital for Chinese capital to work with, to bring about a more rapid rate of development, a rapid rate of human development, developing the capabilities of human beings. I realize that we have overshot by about 12 minutes, so that I won't take any more of our time, and I welcome comments from anybody else in the audience. Thank you.
Thank you. I always very much enjoy Nadeem's comment. And Nadeem did mention Trump, right, 2.0, and also you mentioned human capital deficiency here in Central Asia. And with that, we can kickstart our questions and answers. So basically, all the audience are welcome to make comments, but make it short comments. But also you are encouraged to ask questions, but first identify yourself. Okay, we have about maximum 15 minutes. Okay, now the floor is open.
I think it works now, yeah. Hi, Anna Kresic, regional economist from the EBRD. One very specific question, just to kind of see your thoughts of whoever wants to respond on what do you actually expect from the regional cooperation when it comes to the economic outcomes afterwards. Let's say 10 years from now, what do you think is going to be a success of enhanced regional cooperation in Central Asia? Be as specific or as vague as you want to be. Is it energy? Is it something specific in transport, customs, soft infrastructure, hard, whatever example you think will be a success 10 years from now? Thanks.
Very good question.
Thank you. I feel like I must respond to that. I'm working for Regional Cooperation Integration Unit at ADB, so in this region, so that's what we're working for. So, well, on the optimistic scenario, if everything goes very well, and if all these positive intentions of all governments, which are so clear now, materialize, I would see, first of all, substantial progress in terms of connectivity, both transport and digital connectivity, and seamless transit and trade between economies, which with all these custom systems, SPS systems, and other systems working smoothly, as in some other parts of the world, which is not the case so far. And all this middle corridor starts functioning without much delays. Well, of course, there are kind of objective challenges to this. Well, there's still a bunch of landlocked economies, and still Caspian Sea is so weather dependent, and the sea levels goes down and maybe up again. So that's difficult to prevent. But all human-generated issues will be resolved. And also on the human development front, I would see much more cooperation. For example, conscious creation of a technical university or technical college in Kazakhstan serving Central Asia. On different profession, technical college serving all, in Uzbekistan serving all Central Asia. In Kyrgyzstan, in Tajikistan, well, maybe 10 years, a little bit too little for that, to achieve that. But maybe Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan, it might be more doable. These kind of things. Thank you very much.
If I could just add, on the 2nd of September, was it, that President Tokayev gave a speech to the parliament, in which he pointed out that an attempt has been made already to attract 23 well-established international universities to Kazakhstan. We also know that some well-established universities have entered Uzbekistan. So to reinforce the point that Roman is making, there is a push already underway to build a stock of human capital, because its deficiency, especially in the technical fields, has been well recognized now.
But anyway,
Thank you.
To conclude, I come back to your question. Central Asia regional cooperation in 10 years' time, I do hope with all these terrible global context, this can create external environment that can strengthen regional integration, both in Europe, in Central Asia, in Southeast Asia. I do hope that we will see that moment come. Okay, with that, I end, and thank you all.
Thank you to the panelists.
Thank you so much.